Welcome to Animecaps. In this video, we will explain Deadman Wonderland. This anime tells the story of a middle school boy who is thrown into a world of sadistic inmates and enigmatic powers, to live in constant fear of the lethal collar placed around his neck that is slowed only by winning in the prison's deathly games. He must bet his life to survive in a ruthless place where it isn't always easy to tell friend from foe. Will he be able to gain allies to escape from that terrible prison? Let's find out in Deadman Wonderland. Deadman Wonderland is set in modern Japan. One day, a mysterious disaster struck the mainland, destroying most of Tokyo and sinking 3/4 of it into the ocean. The disaster was later named the Red Hole. In the end, Tokyo began to be forgotten, and the capital city of Japan was moved to Saitama. But a few years later, to revive Tokyo, a privately operated prison called Deadman Wonderland was built right at the center of the disaster. It was no ordinary prison. The inmates there are forced to play dangerous attractions and games for the visiting tourists. On the other hand, for oblivious tourists, Deadman Wonderland is nothing more than a unique amusement park. 10 years after the disaster that devastated Tokyo, a junior high school student named Ganta plans to go on a school trip to Deadman Wonderland with his classmates in the next few days. Before class started, he and his friends talked about the school trip with great enthusiasm, as if they couldn't wait to go there soon. Their conversation, however, was cut short after the school bell rang, signaling that class was about to begin. When the class had just started, Ganta suddenly heard a lullaby, and he felt the song was familiar to him. It turned out that the voice came from the man in the red robe floating outside the window. For no apparent reason, the mysterious man then massacred all the students in the class, except for Ganta. Before Ganta could realize what had happened, the man in the red robe slid a red crystal into Ganta's chest, causing him to faint. Ganta then wakes up in the hospital. But there, he was immediately arrested by the police on charges of mass murder of his classmates. Panicked, he attempted to deny their accusations, citing the red-robed man who massacred his friends. But the police ignored him and led him out of the room. He could only calm down a little after Tamaki, the man who claimed to be his lawyer, promised to help him in the case. However, in court, Ganta was sentenced to death. Tamaki, the fake lawyer, turned out to be fabricating false evidence in the form of a video, showing Ganta's guilty plea. As a result, Ganta is sent to Deadman Wonderland, which turns out to be run by Tamaki. He and some prison administrators had even planned to kill Ganta and make his death look like an accident. Ganta's first day in Deadman Wonderland was very hard. After accidentally colliding with a fellow inmate and seeing the same person slashed with a sword by a warden, he had to undergo forced labor. Life in prison was so hard that he wanted to end his life. While he was working, out of nowhere, a white-haired girl named Shiro came to him. She then tries to comfort him and even says that they are old friends, even though he doesn't remember her at all. In the middle of their conversation, a bunch of bullies suddenly came to harass Ganta because they were annoyed to see him having fun with a girl, even though it was just a few days ago that he was slandered massacring his classmates. Of course, Shiro tried to help Ganta from the bullies, but they beat her unconscious. Alone, Ganta was helpless against the bullies. While they were beating Ganta, a bomb detonated a nearby tower, causing a giant iron ball on top of the tower to fall toward them. However, when the orb was only a few meters away from Ganta, the red crystal on his chest lit up and seemed to give him magical powers. Instantly, he became able to control the blood that oozed out of his body, then used his newfound power to destroy the iron ball. In the end, he and Shiro managed to escape death. It turns out that the person who planted the bomb on the tower was Tamaki. Tamaki, who previously wanted Ganta's death, decided to let him live longer after seeing his power. He wanted to play with him first before killing him. Moments later, Ganta is treated at the prison clinic by a nurse, who then advises him to eat candy as soon as possible. Every inmate sentenced to death in Deadman Wonderland is fitted with a special collar that, apart from functioning as a locator, stunner, and life monitor, can also inject poison into their bodies. Therefore, they had to eat candy every 3 days if they wanted to live. And to get the candy, they have to buy it with cash points, the currency used in Deadman Wonderland. But Ganta doesn't seem to know about all that. He even felt that he was not given candy when he arrived. While he and the nurse were talking, a patient interrupted them. The patient turns out to be Yo Takami, the young man who bumped into Ganta just as he arrived. Yo then said that it was possible that Ganta's candy fell from his bundle when they collided, and for that, he apologized. Their conversation was interrupted again because Shiro suddenly appeared from the air vent. She then invites Ganta to play in a dog race, which she thinks is just an ordinary game, as the name implies. But in truth, it was a dangerous survival game that could cost its participants their lives. On the bright side, the winner of the game can get a lot of cash points. Knowing that Ganta will be participating in a dog race, Yo then contacts Tamaki, who immediately resets the difficulty level of the dog race obstacle to the hardest. With this, it is revealed that Yo is the spy Tamaki assigned to keep an eye on Ganta. Long story short, the dog race finally started, and after knowing that the main prize of this game is 100,000 cash points, Ganta is determined to try his best, because after all, he needs cash points to buy candy. However, he was immediately frightened when he realized the obstacles he was facing were so unreasonable. His fear intensified when he saw the participants die one by one right in front of him. Fortunately, Shiro always protects and saves him from danger. Until they finally reach the final stage, where they have to face off against the strongest participant, Kazumasa Kouzuji, in a battle royale. The rule is that whoever can hold the Deadman ball until the end will be the winner. The game begins, and after a few moments of chasing the ball, Ganta manages to catch it, though that makes Kazumasa continue to chase him relentlessly. One by one, the floor they were on collapsed, forcing them to keep moving so as not to fall into the hole. Ganta then decides to fight Kazumasa, and thanks to his collaboration with Shiro, he manages to knock Kazumasa into the hole, making him die instantly after being stabbed by sharp spikes at the bottom of the hole. In the end, the ball fell into Shiro's arms, who then fell as well. She quickly threw the ball at Ganta so he could win the game. But instead of catching it, he prefers to save her. And as a result, no one wins the dog race. The next day, the prisoners discussed the dog race, and they felt that something was not right about it because the difficulty level was really inhuman. Yo thought so too, and he suspected it had something to do with Ganta. He then went to Ganta, who was writing a will in his cell. He had given up, because in the end, he failed to get the candy he really needed. But to his surprise, Yo gave his candy to Ganta, who was moved by his kindness. He didn't realize Yo wanted to make him owe his life. Ganta and Yo then relax in the garden, and just then, the man in the red robe suddenly appeared and attacked the inmates around Ganta. For some reason, the man's appearance in the red robe made the red crystal on Ganta's chest glow, and he was able to control his blood again. With all his might, he then launched an attack that hit the red robed man right on his head. But his attack had no effect on the man. Without saying anything, the man just walked away. Ganta reflexively chased after him, but he was already too weak from lack of blood, and before long, he passed out. Seeing the whole incident through CCTV, Tamaki immediately ordered his subordinates to chase the man in the red robe, whom he called Wretched Egg. Apparently, Wretched Egg is the result of an experiment in Deadman Wonderland. Ganta regains consciousness at the clinic, where he later hears some inmates gossiping about Wretched Egg. One of them claimed to have seen someone with the exact power of a Wretched Egg, and the officers locked him in the prison's G block. With that info, Ganta and Shiro rush towards the G block. But before they reach it, they run into Yo, who informs them that the G block doesn't exist because the last block in the prison is the F block. But suddenly, Shiro claims that she knows the secret passage that leads to the G block, although she seems strangely unwilling to tell them where the secret passage is. It was only after they were caught by a patrol robot that she took them to the secret passage. Unfortunately, the robot did not necessarily give up. It chased them through the secret passage until it could corner them. Shiro then decides to confront the robot, although her recklessness worries Ganta. Therefore, he tried to use his strength to save her, but failed. His power didn't come out because he didn't seem to have fully mastered it yet. Suddenly, a man who possesses the same power as Ganta appears, and he easily destroys the robot. Thinking that the man was Wretched Egg, Ganta immediately ran to attack him, although he soon stopped after the man created a sword from his blood. Ganta then thought for a moment, and finally he realized that the nature and source of his strength was his own blood. After that, he was able to bring out his strength again. But unfortunately, his strength didn't hurt the man in the slightest. As if feeling that he was no match for the man, Ganta then spoke to him, and he finally knew that the man, whose name is Senji Kiyomasa, was not Wretched Egg. And it turns out that it's not only the Wretched Egg that controls the power of blood, but also all the inhabitants of the G block, who are commonly called Deadmen. Their fight, as well as their conversation, ends when a special squad from the prison appears. They then shoot Senji and Ganta with tranquilizer guns, immobilizing them. After that, they took Ganta, Senji, Shiro, and Yo away. Upon awakening, Ganta finds himself in the research room with Tamaki. This is where Tamaki admits that he tricked Ganta into being thrown into Deadman Wonderland, because he wanted to gather people with special powers like Ganta to be used as tourist spectacles. Tamaki has even planned that tomorrow Ganta will join the Carnival Corps, which is a life and death battle between dead men, and Ganta is set to fight Senji. Then, while torturing Ganta, Tamaki explains to him about the wretched egg, which turns out to be the first person to gain bloodbending powers, as well as the most dangerous convict in Deadman Wonderland. Hearing all of Tamaki's words, Ganta was furious. He swore he would kill Wretched Egg and Tamaki. The next day, the fight between Ganta and Senji begins, with the rich watching and making their bets. Still trying to learn to control his powers, Ganta is only capable of small blood bullets which have no effect on Senji, who then tells Ganta that if he continues to adopt such tactics, sooner or later he will pass out from blood loss. His predictions come true. Ganta starts to get tired and dizzy, and Senji uses the opportunity to attack. However, Ganta does not give up easily. Even though he was beaten badly, he rose again. He realized that he was outclassed by his opponent, and because of that, he had to use a strategy. He tried to drop an object that was on the ceiling, and when Senji's attention was distracted, he reduced his distance from Senji and shot him right in the chest. Ganta ends up winning his battle with Senji, who graciously admits his defeat. He even asked Ganta to be his friend. However, sometime after the fight was over, Ganta was surprised to learn the consequences that must be accepted by the loser. Senji was forced to give up his right eye to be used as research material. Since his battle in Carnival Corps ended, Ganta was placed in a cell in the G block. Alone, he became reminded of Shiro and Yo he hadn't seen in a long time, wondering how they were doing now. While he was daydreaming, he suddenly heard the voice of someone asking for help. It turned out that the voice came from a female prisoner who was being bullied by a perverted old man. Ganta immediately saves her, who then takes him to her room. There, the girl introduced herself as Minatsuki Takami. She even admitted that she was imprisoned for killing her father, who often tortured her. However, she claims that she killed him by accident. Hearing her story, Ganta begins to sympathize with her and offers to help her escape. Unfortunately, their escape attempt was thwarted by the guards, who then informed the two that they would be fighting in the next Carnival Corps. On the day of the match, Ganta still tried to calm Minatsuki, and even promised not to hurt her. But his kindness was repaid by her betrayal. Her innocence that she showed him yesterday was just a pretense. She is a crazy psychopathic girl. Just look at her face. Angry at being betrayed, Ganta immediately counterattacked. But in the midst of their fight, Yo came to stop Ganta and forbade him from attacking Minatsuki, because it turned out that she is Yo's sister. In the past, Yo had deliberately allowed himself to be imprisoned, and all this time, he had been collecting cash points to free her. However, upon seeing her true nature, he realized that she actually killed their father knowingly. In the end, Yo turned against Minatsuki. Now she knew what it was like to be betrayed, and she didn't like it. She catches Yo with her powers, threatening to kill him. But Ganta reacts quickly by shooting his blood to free Yo. After Yo was free, he proceeded to shoot Minatsuki, before ending his attack with a powerful headbutt. Ganta finally wins. Meanwhile, Shiro is undergoing her own battle against an old man, who is thought to be the owner of Deadman Wonderland. And from that fight, it was revealed that Shiro was the wretched egg all along. As for why she almost never changes after Ganta is thrown into Deadman Wonderland, it's because in the middle of the prison, there is a device called the Mother Goose program that always plays lullaby. And if Shiro heard that lullaby, Wretched Egg's personality would be sealed within her. On the other hand, every time she didn't hear the lullaby, the Wretched Egg would appear and take over her. Just like now, when she fought the old man. And with her destructive power, Wretched Egg, aka Shiro, finally managed to kill the old man. The fight between Wretched Egg and the old man was so fierce that it caused a great shock that destroyed several places in the prison, including the room where Ganta was. Luckily, he survived. Although then, he suddenly heard a lullaby, making him recall his childhood memories. It turned out that when he was a child, he had met Shiro, who at that time was being researched by his scientist mother. At that time, Shiro had saved him from a fierce dog that was about to attack him. The scene then moves back to the present, where Tamaki is talking to a prison scientist assigned to research the body parts of users of blood-controlling powers. She discovers that the red crystal in Ganta's chest is a material produced by Wretched Egg after the Red Hole incident. Based on these findings, they concluded that Ganta's power came from Shiro. Meanwhile, when Ganta was walking down the hall, he was suddenly attacked by a white-haired woman named Karako. But apparently, she only intends to test Ganta because she wants to invite Ganta to join her group, Scar Chain. She immediately takes him to the group's place, where he meets the head of Scar Chain, Nagi, who explains to him that the group wants to destroy Deadman Wonderland by exposing the evils in it to the world. To convince Ganta, Nagi shows him the power of the scar chain by hacking the prison system and manipulating the punishment Minatsuki will receive after losing in Carnival Corpse. With that, instead of losing a single body part as Senji did, she only lost her hair. Seeing what happened to Minatsuki, Ganta breathed a sigh of relief. But before he could answer Naga's invitation, a man carrying a guitar-shaped machine gun came in and attacked them. Ganta then tries to fight back, but his blood attack doesn't work against the man, whose name is Genkaku. In this critical situation, luckily, Shiro, who had regained control after hearing the lullaby, came to Ganta's rescue. Because his guitar was damaged by Shiro, Genkaku could only leave from there. The situation then calms down again, although Ganta is still confused because his ability doesn't work on Genkaku. After some time, all of Scar Chain's personnel finally gathered. Nagi introduces Ganta and Shiro to them before starting the meeting and revealing his plan to destroy Deadman Wonderland. Apparently, Nagi wants them to carry out massive prison breaks when the government conducts annual inspections later, and then informs them of illegal violations that occur inside the prison. However, there is one thing that has the potential to become an obstacle to their plans, namely the Undertakers, an anti-Deadman squad containing dangerous criminals under Tamaki's control. And one of the Undertakers is Genkaku. Hearing Naga's explanation, Ganta immediately told them that the power of blood did not work against the Undertakers. But one of the Scar Chain hackers, Rokuro, denied Ganta's statement before showing CCTV footage of Ganta's fight against Genkaku. It turned out to be true. Ganta's attack was not ineffective, but missed. That confused Ganta, as he was sure that Genkaku had stopped his attack. Annoyed that no one believed him, he left their base. Ganta then went to Senji to ask him about the problem with his power, but Senji had never experienced it before. They continued their conversation until the topic changed to Nagi. Apparently, 2 years ago, Tamaki arranged for Nagi to fight his own wife in the Carnival Corpse, forcing him to kill her. And that incident made Nagi hate the prison so much. A few days later, Scar Chain springs into action, though Ganta forbids Shiro to come along. Nagi asks the members of Scar Chain to leak data on a chip that contains inhuman activities that occur in the prison. Nagi and Rokuro will take over the control room to let the rest of them out of prison and hand the chip over to the government inspection officer. At first, their plan went smoothly, with Rokuro and Nagi seizing the control room without any major problems. The first problem arose when Ganta's team had to leave Karako trapped on a bridge. After walking for a while, they finally arrived at the elevator that would take them outside. But they can't use it because Nagi and Rokuro still haven't activated it. Actually, Nagi and Rokuro were about to activate the elevator, but suddenly, a little girl entered the room. It turns out that Rokuro has secretly defected to the Undertakers, and the little girl is one of the Undertakers assigned to kill Nagi. Nagi did not stay silent. He immediately attacked her using his strength. But to his surprise, the projectiles he threw vanished instantly when they touched her sword. It turns out that what Ganta said is true. The power of blood doesn't work against Undertakers. The CCTV footage shown yesterday by Rokuro had been manipulated so that it looked as if Ganta's attack had missed. Nagi was helpless in front of the little girl, who pierced his skin and flesh, little by little, while putting a smile on her face, before slamming her sword into his arm, cutting it instantly. With the last of his strength, Nagi then shifted his attack to Rokuro and pulled the elevator lever before falling unconscious. The elevator is now active, and Ganta's team immediately jumps into it and goes up to the top floor. But once they arrived at the destination floor, they found Genkaku and the Undertakers waiting for them. Many of them died after Genkaku opened fire on them, leaving the team with only 4 people, including Ganta. But surprisingly, Genkaku and his group just left them. Ganta and the others felt it was their good chance to deliver the chip to the inspection officer. But before they could move, Shiro suddenly appeared, snatched the chip from Ganta's hand, and threw it into the flames. No doubt, Ganta was furious at her, but she argued that the chip was dangerous for him. Unable to accept her absurd explanation, he then hit her cheek. In the end, Scar Chain's plan failed miserably. Fortunately, Karako is still alive, and so, she temporarily takes over the leadership seat from Nagi. She believes that the Undertakers haven't killed Nagi yet. Not long after, Rokuro appeared with a handful of Undertakers. He was furious to learn that the chip had been destroyed, as he had planted a bomb on it to blow up all the remaining Scar Chain members. And now he wanted to know who was responsible for destroying the chip. Hearing Rokuro's words, Ganta realized that Shiro had saved him when she threw away the chip. On the other hand, Rokuro the traitor then ordered the Undertakers to arrest the remaining Scar Chain personnel. But luckily, before they were taken away, Senji came to their aid and defeated the Undertakers. The situation now turned against Rokuro, who was then captured by Scar Chain. The scene then moves on to Nagi, who turns out to be still alive. But he is bound in front of Genkaku, who injects him with liquid to make him side with the Undertakers. Meanwhile, Ganta, feeling weak and useless, comes to Senji and asks him to train him. Senji happily complies with Ganta's request. The training session begins, and Ganta tries to strengthen his blood bullet technique. But his efforts never bear fruit despite having tried it many times. He even almost fainted from lack of blood. It was only on his last try that he could finally shoot out an extremely powerful blood bullet. Just moments later, Genkaku announces that he has captured Karako and Shiro, threatening to torture them both to death if the rest of the Scar Chain personnel don't turn themselves in. Despite the lack of blood, Ganta rushes to the place where Genkaku is holding them. There, he immediately attacked the Undertakers with the remnants of his blood, but his attacks were futile, and he fell limp from the lack of blood. Seeing Ganta like that, Shiro immediately tried to save him, but the little girl with the big sword hit her so that she crashed into the wall. The situation got worse, because then, Genkaku showed Nagi who he had turned into a rampaging demon. He couldn't tell the difference between friend and foe, so he attacked the Undertakers who were on guard. While protecting Shiro, Ganta tries to resuscitate Nagi, reminding him of his mission to avenge his wife's death. Then, Karako follows up on Ganta's attempt by slapping Nagi hard, bringing him back to his senses. However, while they were smiling at each other, Genkaku suddenly stabbed Karako and shot Nagi, leaving a hole in his stomach. As if he had lost his sanity, Genkaku then opened fire on his men and slaughtered them all. Frustrated by the situation in front of him, Ganta tried to get up, and the red crystal on his chest suddenly lit up. But his strength still hadn't recovered, so when Genkaku pointed the gun at him, he couldn't help but stare at it. It was then that Shiro stood in front of Ganta to protect him. Even so, her facial expression seemed to turn strange, indicating that she had turned into the wretched egg. Unaware of Shiro's change, Ganta forced himself to stand up and fight Genkaku, putting all his strength into his bloodshot technique. Realizing Ganta's attack could injure him, Genkaku then tried to dodge, but he couldn't move because Nagi was holding the sleeve of his robe. As a result, he died after being hit by Ganta's devastating attack. Regardless of the outcome of the fight, Ganta and the others ended up failing to expose Deadman Wonderland's depravity to the public. And in the end, Ganta chooses to stay behind, even though some of his friends escaped from prison. At the end of the anime, Shiro sings a lullaby to Ganta. In response, Ganta said that the last time he heard a lullaby was just before someone in a red robe slaughtered his classmates. So, the moral we can take from this anime is that sometimes, no matter how hard we try, we can't get what we want if conditions don't allow us to get it. But behind the failure, we may get something else, a substitute for what we wanted before.